Okay, everyone, welcome to the space. Thank you for your patience. I had another event tonight. I just finished that up, so I'm here with you all, whoever's here. It's wonderful to be here. Um, so I'm really just really interested in just working with some energy of the mother tonight. And in practice, I know some of you have been sitting already, but just really being called to enter into a little more engagement with the mother in the form of Tara, maybe, and to really, see if we can just send some energy into some stuff that's really happening, all over the place. Here, just really experiencing. Folks who are just really struggling with isolation and loneliness, and now with, the weather in certain parts of the country being really tough, then we're still in the pandemic and so forth and so on. We just really, want to do as much as we can to send energy, to allow ourselves to be held, by the mother, and to really get into the habit of allowing ourselves to be really touched by this energy. And the energy of the mother is the energy of space. It's the energy of tenderness. It's a space that feels, or energy that feels vulnerable. I think sometimes we want this to feel a certain way, like we want it to feel good. When I think about being held by the mother, it's not something that I'm equating to feeling good, but it's really something that is helping some space open up around my experience of suffering, of brokenheartedness, whatever it may be for us in the moment. We need to be tended to, like we need to be held, and we need to not only be tended to and held, we need to develop the capacity to allow ourselves to be held, to allow our broken hearts, to be wrapped and supported. It's like a baby, I know some of you have children, you have babies and so forth, that like just holding a baby, the gentleness that we bring to holding a baby and the protectiveness, particularly if it's our child, right? I'm not saying that, like, if it's not your child, you're not going to give a shit about the baby, but I'm just saying that, like, when it's our child, right? I mean, I don't have children, but when it's a child, a baby really close to us, like, we want to do everything possible to take care. And when that child, that baby is upset and crying and everything, we don't like push the child away. We hold them, and often the only thing that we can do is just like hold them and just wait, and try to make them as comfortable as possible, but knowing that in that moment they're not comfortable. And so that's what we're doing. That's what the mother is doing to us. She's holding us like a child, right? Like a baby who's just really out of control, who's just really uncomfortable, who needs something. Like we need something. Like we absolutely need something. And how can we allow ourselves to be offered what we need? How do we invite the mother to come in and just say, this is what you need? Well, to say, this is what I have to offer you. Because what you need is to be held, to be tended to. This is the hardest practice. This is one of the hardest practices that we engage in because, again, as I was saying before, many of us, we just resist being helped. We just resist being tended to. We resist care. And that, that comes from comes from trauma, right? It comes from years of not trusting care. It comes from years of being hurt. Like when we open up, because being cared for means that we're practicing vulnerability. Vulnerability means that the tenderness is exposed. Like we let down these barriers and there's this tenderness. And many of us have been hurt when we've exposed that tenderness. You know, Sonny Renee Taylor and I talked about this quite a bit on Sunday. If you didn't check that out, you can check that out on my Instagram page, and eventually we'll email that out in my newsletter. You know, but we talked about like vulnerability and what people have to do to earn that vulnerability. And many of us have been deeply hurt because we didn't know how to really let people earn our trust, right? You know, sometimes we've been in situations where we've just kind of had to be vulnerable, and we've been hurt because of that. And then, of course, there's the trauma that arises from that as well. You know, so we've been vulnerable with people who haven't earned the right to hold that vulnerability, you know, and when people haven't earned it, then usually like what happens is that they don't actually know how to handle our vulnerability. And often that comes from a place of them not knowing how to handle their vulnerability, you know, their tenderness. People who earn our trust and earn our vulnerability are people who have first done the work to allow their vulnerability, their tenderness to be held. From that, the work that they've done, they've developed a sensitivity and awareness of how crucial and special and wonderful touching or being exposed to someone's vulnerability is. And I think about all the ways and all the times in which I've struggled with that, and I still struggle with that. It's effort and diligence and practice, right? You know, to engage in this continuous unfolding, this continuous opening through the pain and into the pain. I mean, you get really exposed. It can be excruciating, right? It's like being outside. It's like being wet, you know, and then stepping outside into like below zero weather, freezing weather. That's for me in my practice is how it feels. It's like, oh my God, this is like excruciating. But you stick with it. Because I know that like I'm not going to die, but I know that like this pain is just a sign that I need to deepen my capacity to be open. And there are different kinds of vulnerability as well. Like I think as we talked about this on Sunday, but there's a vulnerability that I have to train in for myself. Like, how do I tell myself the truth? How do I let myself touch into my own woundedness, right? How do I love myself? How do I practice compassion for myself? That's self vulnerability for self. Like if I can't do that for myself, it's going to be much more difficult for me to do that for others. There's one of my favorite artists, musicians, is a performer named Serpent with Feet. Serpent with Feet. It's all one word, Serpent with Feet. And he's a Black, queer, like R&B, pop, electronic, like all the stuff, right? But he is an incredible lyricist. And the lyrics draw me into songs. quite frankly, the lyrics, you know, and minor keys also probably into music. There's a genre of music that I call sad, lonely boy music. And that's like Surfing with Feed and James Blake, and Frank Ocean. You know, like he's kind of like queer, sensitive, you know, male, like art musicians, you know, little, you know. But anyway, you know, one of his songs called "The Four Ethers," which is actually one of my favorite, you know, one of my favorite songs by him. He has this line where it's like, um, how can I, what's the lyric? I was just talking about this with someone today. How can I touch you if you don't touch yourself? Basically is the lyric. Really, you know, how can I be with you if you can't be with yourself? You know, and then that song he just talks about, oh, you know, and it's the trauma that keeps you. You know, it's the trauma that keeps us from being with ourselves. You know, and then that makes the work of someone trying to touch us, to be with us, even harder. You know, and it goes back to this whole vulnerability thing. It's like when we're open for care, it's like we're touching up against the trauma, which is compelling us to shut down to protect ourselves. That's the tension, the dilemma, the contradiction that we're always pushing against. You know, well, many of us are always pushing against. It's like, yes, we say we want to be cared for, but we sabotage the care that people are trying to offer us because we were hurt, we were traumatized. You know, that trauma means that we remember the times where we've opened and been deeply hurt, and we don't want to go back, because trauma is about memory as well. It's about remembering what happened before and not wanting to do that again, right? And then that becomes a barrier for us doing something different. You know, and then the practice is learning to actually trust, you know, in very small ways, people or practices, you know, that can help us actually experience care. But we have to take a risk to do that. I think practice in general is a risk, because it's taking us out of what feels comfortable and known into often what is unknown and what is uncomfortable. We do that intentionally. We're doing that intentionally. We're choosing that. You know, and this is why, you know, this is so much of the work that I'm trying to do with people in the world. It's like, I want you to choose to move through the trauma as best as you can into a space of being cared for. You know, of course, that care is also calling us to experience the brokenheartedness as well. You know, I have, you know, a couple of different like lovers and partners. It's always so funny when I use this word lover. It reminds me of that Saturday Night Live skit. With the lovers, so like they're like lovers, you know. And I always say when I hear myself say lovers, you know, I feel like I'm like middle aged, which I am, you know, but like middle aged, intellectual from a certain period. You know, it's my lover. Anyway, I'm not going to get distracted with that. But what I was saying is, yeah, I have like, you know, different lovers, and, you know, and in the past and even now, you know, to an extent, you know, not really with, you know, just because of things, you know, it's hard to be with people right now, as many of us have been experiencing for a year. but when I have been with lovers, partners, the ways in which those kinds of relationships and intimacies mirror back our own wounding. I just think that's so much of what, the music of Serpent with Feet is just like, it's really about the trauma of intimacy, and the work that I've had to really put into showing up to that trauma when I've been in intimates, interactions with lovers, where it's like, oh, this is the vulnerability, and then the fear and the memories and the trauma, and then you remember the last time you did this, or this one time in the past, you came into this openness and the ways in which it was just like thrown back in your face, and you don't want to do that again. And you don't trust the person that you're with to hold this vulnerability, and you shut down, then fucking, then I just love how things just come out of my mouth. And then you're not, and then like when you're talking about sex, that kind of exchange, like, when it's not vulnerable, when it's not open, when the trauma is there, it goes from like, there's a difference between like making love and fucking. I know this may be semantics, but I think when it's just fucking, it's like, yeah, there's no interest in the vulnerability. There's no interest in drawing closer to a lover, to a partner, right? But lovemaking is like, it's when someone is actually holding your pain and noticing it, right? And they're choosing to draw closer to that pain, right? And to make love to the pain as they're making love to you and your body and mind and so forth. But that takes practice, and it takes work, right? And again, it takes people earning the right, in this case, to make love to you. And also vice versa, like you have to earn people's trust, right? To be in proximity to their vulnerability and to make love. And making love, it's not just about this physicality and eroticism and sex. It's, making love is really about just this deep intimacy that we hold with each other. The way that like your heart can break open and that person just holds it. They hold the space for you. They don't flinch. They don't retreat. They just show up because they're showing up because they're allowing their hearts to break as well. They're not afraid of your brokenheartedness because they're not afraid of their brokenheartedness. And they see a commonality between these experiences of their experience of brokenheartedness and your experience of brokenheartedness. That's emotional labor as well. This is all about the labor that we're doing to notice and experience our own emotional realities, our own emotional bodies, as I often say in my work. To touch and experience these emotional bodies. I just happen to have a copy of Love and Rage in front of me. I literally just have these all over the place. I use them as doorstops. I use them to balance tables that are wobbly. Just kind of have all these books around. I really, in chapter 5, which is the embodiment chapter, I start out with a letter to Tony. And Tony was this guy that I met somewhere. I can't give you all these details, right? But there's this guy that I met somewhere. We had a couple of days together. I actually should write a movie about it one day. But it'll happen when Love and Rage gets options. Can you imagine a movie being made about love and rage? Big angry movie. So I met Tony, and again, we spent a couple of days together, and I really experienced a lot of that. Everything that I've been really talking about, this vulnerability and lovemaking, and the ways in which my trauma was being reflected back to me in that moment, and all the work that I knew that I still had to do for myself. And I just want to read a little bit of this, since we just, it was just Valentine's Day on Sunday. I think this is a really nice follow-up. Let me see. So I'll begin here. I remember the night you held me, and something in the evening or the warmth of your body offered me the permission to say how much I felt I didn't deserve your arms around me. I shared how I could not understand why you were attracted to me, how I confided in you the many times I have failed to love my body and all the times it has failed to love me in return. I assumed that you had no clue as to how to relate to my struggle until you looked at me and said how you were here with me now and there wasn't any other place you wanted to be. And then how you spoke of those many years of not being able to look in the mirror, and those same years of loneliness, believing that you did not deserve to be touched or held kindly in the same way you were holding me. Your disclosure was the moment I stopped feeling so alone. And that's the power of when someone holds our vulnerability. Like, that's the power. That's the moment when it's like, oh, like, I'm not alone. That's the beginning of the tending to. It's like, oh, you're realizing I'm not the only one having this experience. And Tony, like in my opinion, was someone who was just beautiful. He was a very beautiful person. And when I started talking, when I just really started talking about how I just felt really uncomfortable and how I didn't deserve to be here and I didn't deserve to be touched, I remember his reaction. He was just like so confused, like he was just like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm not that special. Like, I grew up, just feeling as if like I was just like not beautiful or attractive, and and I don't feel that way about you, and I understand where you're coming from, and and the way, just like the seriousness that he held my own discomfort, in that moment, by offering his discomfort and saying, yeah, I've been there. But you also have to understand that I'm choosing to be with you in this moment. Like, I'm making a choice. I'm not being forced to be here. I like being with you, and those experiences make the difference, in our healing. Other time I talk about in the book where, I was a freshman in college and I was sitting in a lobby with two, girlfriends of mine. And, we started talking about guys. And for the first time in my life, I, was articulating like my attraction to the men. I was out, I was out, but like newly out. I started coming out to them in high school, to my high school. Well, the head of the lesbians in my high school, Sky Kennedy, because most lesbians in the 90s were named Sky. or they changed their name to Sky. But Sky was like the head of the lesbians in my high school. And I came out to her and went to college and was just really, if you've had this like experience of like doing something like that, going to college, just leaving home or going into a new environment when you were young, like it's just like really thrilling. It's just super thrilling, super enthralling. And I just began to like sit there one night and just like talk about how hot these guys were. It was like not the football team, the members of the basketball team started walking through. I think they would just come from practice. I was like, yeah, they're hot. And I realized, oh my God, like I'm saying this out loud instead of in my mind. And I remember I froze and I stopped. I was like 19, so I, just turned 19 actually. And no, I actually wasn't 19. I was still 18. And they just looked at me and they're like, no, you can say it. You can say it. It's okay. I remember that the care that they took, and it was like so liberating for these two. And one of them, we were the same age. The other one was about 2 years older than us. They were just like, it's okay. Those little moments that turn into these sparks of liberation for us in the moment. And they probably didn't even know that. I know they took the moment seriously, but I don't know if they realized how imperative that was for me to be given permission to say that out loud, and quite frankly, ever since that day, I've been literally out of control. I just say whatever comes in my mind. But I think about what would have happened if they would have been like, oh my God, Rod, what are you saying? I can't believe, that you're saying that, or whatever their negative reaction would have been, possibly, like how that would have created a trauma that I don't know if I would have gotten through. Who knows? I just, from these moments, there have been many other moments as well. Here's just a few that I've written about. But these moments taught me how important it is to be trusted and to be considered someone who can hold vulnerability. That has been at the heart of my, efforts to become a good teacher, is having the capacity to hold space for people in these moments. To let people say what they need to say, what they have to say, and not to shut down, not to be shocked, to understand the power of these moments and to figure out how to offer this to as many people as possible. And one of the ways that I try to do that is by, letting people know that it's okay to be ourselves. This is why I write the way that I do. This is why I wrote that opening passage about Tony. Like, I didn't have to write about that, but like, something kept telling me, no, like, you have to talk about this. Like, you have to, if you want people to be vulnerable, you have to embody vulnerability. I'm a confessional writer. I was, so moved by confessional lists growing up. I was in undergrad, I was an English literature major. And I just like really loved any writer who talked about their life and who talked about their struggle and their love, and who told the truth about their lives, This is why, for instance, I loved Essex Hemphill. It's just because he talked about his life in a way, and it mirrored back to me my life as also a Black queer man, like it's just, oh my God, someone is like telling my life, by telling their life. And I want to offer that same to others, that same kind of gift to other people. But I still want to get at least 10 minutes of practice in, so like this kind of vulnerability, I don't know what I want to do with it, but let's just like lean a little bit, into evoking the mother. I want to actually start by like just chanting this opening mantra to Tara, Om Matara Soha. You can chant along. So again, it's Matara Soha. So just like basically we're saying, hey Mama Tara, how you doing? That's the translation. That's the direct translation of that mantra. Hey Mama Tara, how you doing, girl? How how your people is, how your children is. Okay, let's begin chanting. Matara Soha. Matara Soha. Matara Soha. Matara Soha. Just allowing the energy of the mother to awaken around us, the space that we're sitting in. And just believing, right? Having faith that the mother is awakening around us. That we're slowly beginning to be held within the embrace of the mother. Feel the mother in the space, in the openness, and the warmth. And this warmth isn't about an actual temperature, but the warmth is this energy, like that feels, I don't know, it feels fluid, it feels heavy, full. Begin to imagine that we're offering our brokenheartedness into this space, for the space to hold. Because this is the mother holding the space with us and for us. And as the mother holds the space, we allow our hearts to open, to break. And in our minds, we say, and we ask, Mother, dearest Mother, please hold my brokenheartedness. Letting her hold the shame and the fear and the sorrow. We can even imagine her saying back to us, I'm holding you. I'm always holding you. I'm always with you. And can we trust that? That holding? Can we trust the space? Can we trust this tending to that we're experiencing? So I want to start offering the mantra as well. Om Tare Tu Tare Ture Soha. And you can chant along and just sit and listen. But Either way, allowing ourselves to be held within the spaciousness of the mother. Tare tu re soha. Just resting our minds within the mind of the mother, mingling our two minds together so that we eventually become the mother. Right, so just coming back into the space, shifting our attention back down to the seat, noticing the weight of our bodies making contact with the seat. Taking a few deep inhales, releasing the breath down through the body, out the bottom, down into the seat and the earth. So So releasing the out breath or the exhale down to the body and to the earth. So this is going to help us to ground a little more. Inhaling, releasing down. A few more times. Inhaling, exhaling down. Just feeling more grounded, more stabilized as we breathe through this. All right. Getting some water. Always remembering to hydrate when we do practices like this. Any questions from anyone that we can examine, look at before we close up for tonight? Right. Anything else? Any other questions or anything? All right. Well, we can go ahead and close up for tonight. I want to thank everyone for your patience. Next week, we will definitely have Sadada here. So I have a question. Let me get this one question. Yeah, so questions and the theme today. Thoughts on vulnerability versus codependency, or vulnerability versus oversharing, over expecting folks to add to hold your pain. Well, the thing is, I think that one of the things that we're trying to do is first do what we can to hold our pain, and then asking if we can't, whatever we can't do for ourselves, and we're asking consent from others, in terms of helping us. So a lot of people have definitely been in situations where, people don't even know me, they don't know who I am, but they just start oversharing really intense stuff. And I just feel like that's really dangerous. Maybe they sense something about me that they trust, that could possibly be it. But I think you should also still ask consent. It's like, oh, can I share this? Is it okay if I talk about this? Or also oversharing is a way that we exert power as well, because oversharing is a way for us to manipulate people into empathizing with us. And when people empathize with us, then we gain agency over them. If people care about us, if they're trying to empathize with us, then they're more likely, to follow our suggestions or fulfill our unmet needs if we overshare like that. And people do that intentionally. People There are certain people who really learn that the only way they can get what they need in life is by forcing people to empathize with them, to gain empathy. And sometimes people definitely make shit up. Absolutely. I've definitely seen that happen where people just make up shit because they want to be seen, they want to be cared for. But we always have to be doing whatever work we can to hold space for our own pain. And whatever we're not holding for ourselves, then we're asking consent in relationships for others to help us to hold. And there are people who, are just exhausting because they're not doing anything for themselves. And so they're like forcing people to do all this emotional labor for them. Those are the folks that I just have to create boundaries around. I'm saying, no. I definitely have friendships with people where people use the friendship for me to do emotional labor for them, and I've had to create boundaries, I actually, I had a younger friend, actually a friend in their 20s, who this summer, text me and be like, can you talk about, pain, suffering, and all this stuff. And then finally I had to let him know. I was like, this is not appropriate. Like you don't have my cell phone number, so you can have personal access to private teachings. I told him, like, if you want me to do labor for you, then you need to go through the proper channels. You need to show up to a teaching, you need to show up to a program, or, whenever I have, when I'm not seeing, people personally, in terms of like, one-on-ones, but when I have those open, that's a appropriate time to schedule time with me. But like, it's not appropriate to use our friendship to particularly access me as a teacher without first asking. And that was the thing also. It's like, it wasn't consent. It was like, it was like, no, it's like labor. Like teaching is labor, it's work, And the friendships that really work for me, my personal friendships that work for me with people who see me as a teacher and as a friend, are the relationships where people check in, where people are like, okay, you name the relationship that's happening in the moment. Like, I'll have, situations with friends where they're like, okay, can you be the teacher for like 10 minutes? Because I have this issue that I really need your like professional teaching opinion on. And that's fine, because I've been asked for my consent. I've been given this framework of time for me to be in. And it's good, if I'm resourced that moment, I say, okay, those are the friendships that work out for me, when we're able to name what's happening in the moment, but I've also vice versa had friends who they laid that boundary on me where they're like, you're not the teacher, you're not my teacher, you're my friend. And of course I got that early on when I first began teaching. I had close friends who were just like, you're not recognizing, the ways in which you're kind of like assuming a role with us that you're assuming as teacher and student. We're not your students, we're your friends, and we want you to acknowledge that. And that was really helpful for me to know that. That made me really sensitive around boundaries. So people try to hijack you with with like this oversharing. You say, no, I can't do it. Like I'm about to, this is 9:30 now, so I'm through doing emotional labor for people now. This is it. So you don't get to call unless you're like family, like close family or like really close friends, you know, or a really close lover, like, you know, that's it. Like, this, I'm not doing emotional labor. And even if you're in one of those groups, it's not guaranteed. I'm going to do labor for you tonight, you know, because there's a boundary. It's like, I'm off. You know, I'm going to go like watch my Golden Girl and have my glass of wine because I'm a middle-aged gay man. I'm a middle-aged queer man, you know, and so this is what we do. This is what my people do at this time of night, you know, and you contemplate going to bed and having your red wine and watching Golden Girls. You know, I may watch some Rachel Maddow, you know, but that's it, you know. Anyhow, enough of this. So thank you all so much for being here tonight. And again, Sister Sadada is going to be with you all next week, and she'll be on time as well. And I think that's it for us. And thank you all so much. Please continue practicing, and I will see you in another online space at some point as well. Okay, bye everyone. Be well.